Welcome back once again. Before you discuss the subject of destructive behavior, I'd like to share a story of redemption. It involves a man who is still incarcerated because of violent behavior. I first met Alonzo Dixon when I had the privilege of visiting a prison in Huntsville. Thanks to the chief warden, I was able to interview this man. I entered a small room and Alonzo was on the other side of a metal screen. During his early years in prison, this man had taken on the nickname Big D. He was indeed a huge man who could easily bench over 500 pounds, and furthermore, he was known as being violent. But there he sat, now a gentle giant. You see, his heart had been changed by Jesus Christ. A good friend of mine, who is now with Jesus, dared to enter Big D's cell block. He lovingly shared the gospel that Jesus Christ had died for all of this man's sins, which were many. At an early age, Alonzo had become a part of a gang, a violent and notorious gang. He went on to become a drug dealer and eventually was sentenced to prison for rape. As my friend Henry approached Alonzo's cell, he didn't know that this inmate had made a knife and had it under the pillow he was sitting on. His plan was to commit suicide that very night. And though he was called Big D in prison, he was a very sad and depressed man who was filled with guilt because of some of his past crimes. When Alonzo became a new man in Christ, he broke all ties with the corruption that was taking place behind prison walls, including dealing drugs himself. He won the respect of the officers in his unit and became a man they trusted, which is one reason why I was granted this interview. Henry became Alonzo's mentor. Even though Big D could hardly read and write, he learned, and today his biblical articles and poetry, which he writes behind prison walls, are being used by chaplains in a number of other prisons. As I speak, Alonzo is still incarcerated, but he lives daily as a free man in Christ.
But I want the whole society to know that all it takes is one caring person, just one person, to make a difference in somebody's life. Yes, a lot of us, we made mistakes and we put ourselves in. You can't blame no one but ourselves. But it's you. It's you, the good people. How can I say this? It is just, I had to catch myself there because, see, everything I say, it boils back down to my teacher. He taught me some things that I never thought that I could even, I never thought that I would even be in a position to even say anything about God. I'm very grateful that someone took the time to care about someone like me. And if God would allow me just that chance, that's what I want to do for others. And I know a lot of times society hears that, or they say anything because they're in prison. And I understand that. I understand the negativity. I understand the skepticism. I understand all that. I understand how society feels. But if you truly believe in the power of God, if you truly believe that God changes people, then you'll understand why we have the ministry called From Pain to Joy. Because that's where I stand. I lived in pain, and through the help of my teacher, Mr. Emerson, I stand today filled with joy. Thank you.
As you can see, Alonzo is a changed and thankful man. In the chapter you've just read, I also mentioned the Apostle Paul. Though he committed murder, he became a free man, both culturally and in Christ, because he was operating within the Jewish legal system that was recognized by the Roman Empire. But through God's grace, Paul demonstrates that even a murderer can become one of the greatest Christ followers of all time. Because of God's grace, he could write to the Corinthians and say, "Be imitators of me, just as I also am of Christ." Also, on behalf of his fellow missionaries Silas and Timothy, he could write to the Thessalonians and say, "But we prove to be gentle among you as a nursing mother tenderly cares for her own children." Think about this metaphor, like a nursing mother. That's about as tender a scene as we can ever see. But Paul also used the father metaphor. Just as you know how we were exhorting and encouraging and imploring each one of you as a father would his own children, so that you would walk in a manner worthy of the God who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. This is certainly another beautiful illustration which demonstrates the changes that happened in Paul's life and in the life of my friend Alonzo. As you move on to discuss the answers to the questions on page 153, I suggest that you begin with prayer, thanking God for his grace in each of your lives.